People of iRacing, do you remember why you got hooked? It's generally agreed by now that its driving feel is not as developed or nuanced as R-Factor 2, its visuals and audio lag behind a Assetto Corsa and ACC, and its vehicle selection's got a few gaping holes and an outdated roster, no modding support, not to mention that its cost is far greater than the other sims that are on offer today. Well, I joined iRacing 10 years ago, and I can tell you why I loved it then and still love it today. Because iRacing is first and foremost the best motorsport simulation, not just a driving simulation, and I'll bet you love it for the same reasons whether you realise it or not. iRacing is not for hot lapping by yourself, it's for racing with real competitors and absorbing a piece of that pre-race jitters before every race, wondering what's about to happen between now and the checkered flag. It's for this reason that I appeal to you now that if you haven't considered joining a community organised league, you really should, because it will take your current iRacing motorsport experience and supercharge it. Since getting involved in league racing early this year, I've near enough stopped taking part in the official races because I'm enjoying the league format so much more. At this point, just quickly, please consider clicking that subscribe button to help push me over 1,000 subscribers. I'll appreciate it a lot, and maybe I can buy new socks with the ad revenue gained over the next 12 years. Okay, so there are big differences between league racing and sticking to the official sessions provided by iRacing. Firstly, as you'll know, official races roll around every 1 or 2 hours in your chosen series. You finish work for the day, do a bit of housework or whatever, and finally sit down, register for a session. And if you've got time to spend, you might have a couple of races in one evening, or just have a race every day or every other day. Point being that every week there are probably 100 chances to jump into a session every week, day and night. Contrarily, league racing usually runs just one event per week. Yeah, the event may be a double header or a heat event, but in essence it's just one weekly gathering. This simulates real life in that there's almost always a full week's gap between real life championship rounds and allows a build up to occur for everyone involved, finally converging onto the scheduled race time. It doesn't matter how much practice or preparation you do, you only get one chance, just like real life. If you make bad decisions or crash and burn in a race, consequences on your season-long points tally will be with you for the rest of the season, rather than just a temporary 50-point ding to your iRating. On the flip side, if you put down a legendary drive and place higher than you expect, that points boost is yours for the rest of the season, and your rivals will have to do catching up over the remaining rounds. Which leads me on to the way that leagues score their races. iRacing doesn't really have an easily understandable score system in their respective divisions, whereas leagues definitely do. Each place on the grid is worth a determined number of points, no fuss or wacky equations. This sets you up perfectly for a season-long rivalry with other drivers in the league, which makes things so much more meaningful. When we sit down to see who gets the top spot in the Drivers' F1 Championship, for example, we don't realise that there are midfielders fighting tooth and nail for a mere point further down the grid. And that's how it feels when you race in a league. Every position matters and will make a difference in the finishing results. To make things clearer still, I've seen many leagues discourage car hopping, which, if it's a multi-manufacturer series like GT or Endurance, where you may have Porsche, BMW, Ferrari, etc., this means no more grids full of the optimal car for whatever track we're on this week, like you sometimes see in the official sessions. You pick your car, be it Porsche, Ferrari, BMW, Ford, whatever, at the start of the season, and you stick with it. You got to take the rough with the smooth instead of just picking whichever car suits that particular track best each week. This gives each round in the calendar a lot more character, because as sometimes there is a slight advantage to one car, it will flip around the next race, making it more likely you'll punch above your weight in some rounds, which is great. Which leads me on to driver classes. Unlike iRacing's official sessions, leagues don't usually separate drivers of low or high skill into separate grids altogether, like the official split system does, so you could easily see drivers with 1,000 iRating racing on the same grid as those with 7,000 iRating. Now before you panic, there is a system for this. There's not much hope of beating somebody who is objectively far above your own ability, so to make this interesting, leagues often use pro amateur or amateur classifications based on your ability, so you're never without a fighting chance of being top of your particular class. This means if you're considered a pro, then you are battling for overall first. Whereas if you're in an amateur class, then you're probably fighting to be the top amateur, which may be finishing in 5th, 10th or 15th place. Leagues usually have 2 points tables, or however many points tables there are, to facilitate this, one for each class of driver, and the winner of each league table is lauded equally as much and deserves as much attention as the other. This sets the scene for great rivalries that go on all season long as you compete with your closest competitor on the grid. Which leads me on to the persistent competition. Unlike official sessions where every other race is filled with new names on the grid that you may never have even seen before, league format racing specifically ensures that you race with the same people over the course of the season. Within just a couple of races you'll have a good idea of who is of similar skill to you, and soon you'll be putting a laser sight on specific people who you are really aiming to beat. And if you manage to outfox someone who has been outpacing you all season, you'll be patting yourself on the back for a job well done. Soon you'll start to get to know your competition. Who's safe, who's dangerous, who's going to dive bomb you, who's a little bit nervous. Some circuits will favour you, whereas others will favour your closest rival, which really highlights how organic it can really be. The fact that you recognise the names week in, week out really adds such an extra dimension to the racing. When you're overtaking somebody, you're not just outsmarting a stranger that you've never seen before and will probably never see again. You're getting revenge for an amazing overtake they made on you 2 rounds ago. When there's someone in your mirrors breathing down your neck, it's not just a random name. It's someone who was always placed above you and you now have to hold them back for 5 laps to show them what you're made of. Then after all is said and done, you can compliment or berate them in the post-race chat room afterwards. Which leads me on, vaguely, somehow, to teams. Unlike official races whereby it's not really possible to orchestrate being in the same grid as your friends, with league racing it's effectively guaranteed. There's a whole new level of racing added when you're racing as or against a team of drivers, as they may work together not to fight, making it more of a challenge to pass or defend against them. You don't need to be in a team to race in leagues effectively at all, I haven't, but the ability to run together is a huge strength of league racing, so if you race with a consistent group of friends or pals, then league racing is probably the best way that you guys can all go racing together and share that experience. The grid around you will no longer be a group of lone wolves with no consideration for each other, but pockets of drivers that are much more likely to fight clean. Which leads me on to organisation and race control. Unlike in official sessions where protesting is really only for the most egregious bannable behaviour, league racing has a mechanism to get recourse for wrongdoing even in very minor cases. Many leagues operate a protest system which delivers swift justice where a foul has been committed, often in the form of a points or race penalty. Any racing incident can be subject to a steward's decision, and this can really rein in careless drivers. At the end of the day, if all the drivers are built up to the race over the course of a week, nobody wants any such driver to dash it to bits into turn 1 and to get away with it. Most leagues have a pretty low threshold for booting somebody out of a league, so good behaviour is almost completely assured. Knowing that an incident will be analysed quickly and personally helps keep faith that the league will be fair and legitimate. Which leads me on to the social aspect of league racing. With communication being an important part of league racing, oftentimes an organiser will use a forum or a Discord server to gather all drivers in one place to have some discussion, info sharing, bit of post-race drama and analysis that you can't really find in a chat box during official races. With iRacing being a fairly mature driver demographic, the tone is usually warm and non-toxic, just like you'd expect there to be were it face-to-face. Considering you're racing with the same people over the course of a season, it makes no sense to be a bad sport, especially when there's no hiding place for unsporting behaviour under the watch of race control, all the other drivers and the spectators. Which leads me on to maybe one of the biggest draws of league racing, the broadcasts. If you daydream of being a star on a racetrack and having your performances put on display to the whole world, then league racing is for you. If you're unaware of the broadcasts that often accompany organised leagues, you need only check out the live streams on YouTube, for example, from places such as Apex Racing TV and RaceSpot TV, for example, to see what they can do nowadays. They're really, really well done and can easily match the level of production value seen at real-world events, which makes them perfectly watchable by family and friends who otherwise would have no stake whatsoever in sim racing. but they're going to love to see your adventures as they happen live.
Aaron Powell is the pole sitter. There he goes. Oh, that's going to be a massive check-out. Kevin Kittelman really just mistiming that launch. And Aaron Powell launches away from the pole position. Kittelman drops from second down to fourth immediately, second down to sixth immediately, and will drop much further down than that. I assume so. Full start as well for Daniel Lee. Oh, way off the circuit. For Matty Chambers, has he got an issue? He's very slow on the outside of turn one, and that's straight away a few of the front runners. Whittling down the order, and it's fantastic news for Tom McMahon. He's gone from 8th to 4th in these first few corners. Mighty effort for him. Lee trying to make his way back up. He's back up into 8th place after dropping, I think, as low as 10th for a moment. But you don't need to give Tom McMahon a helping hand, and that is what many of these drivers have done. And he's now only got 3 cars to pass in order to take his 10th race victory of the season.
Hell, goodness me.
Peter Dempsey with a double overtake around the outside, I think that was. Peter Dempsey wants a move from him again. Evan Walsh goes through, and Sergio, how on earth did Peter Dempsey find space around the outside up of Clay Hill? He goes through to 5th place now, but the battle up front is going to get really tasty. 5 laps to go. Craig Breen leads from Keith Dempsey and Jason Cooper. The championship rivals are about to see who's going to take the win here, or can Craig Breen try and hold off these guys in the background? Adrian Campfield trying to find some pace in him as well in the background.
When you know your overtakes and defending will be held up for praise or scrutiny live on stream, it amps up the pressure, probably some way towards the same thing you might feel driving around a circuit with spectators packed in the stands. The viewership for regular broadcasts can stretch into the thousands too, which is fantastic. Racers can even make themselves available for a post-race interview with the commentators too, to put the cherry on top of your motorsport fantasy. The broadcasts are also really the best way to see what league racing is all about from the outside. Which leads me on to how you join a league. It's not always blatantly obvious how to join an organised and broadcasted league, but the community is as such that I'd just recommend checking out the broadcasts on YouTube from Apex Racing TV or Racebot TV. Find a league broadcast in which you like the look of the racing within it, and then you can seek it out with a quick Google search and find the registration details, usually within a dedicated website somewhere. It's easier than you think, and once you're in the league biosphere, it's then much easier to find other leagues that you want to move on to. When new racers discover and feed into league racing, it's like plant food for the community that props it up. Because of league racing, there are now broadcasting brands competing for business. There are genuine actual sponsors paying for logo space on the cars and broadcasts, and it's only set to grow further. If you joined iRacing to pretend to be a racing driver, then up to now, your time in the official sessions has just been a training ground for moving on to the true experience, league racing. All the racing scenes in the background of this video are from my current entry in the Apex Racing GT Championship, which has served as my reference for all of the things I talk about here. It's a good example of league racing with a great balance of competitiveness, variety and community. Go and see if sign-ups are currently open for a league for your preferred type of car and join the scene. Thanks for watching, drop a subscribe if you are a cool person, and comment below if you've got a league to recommend to other viewers that may drop by and follow their nose into their very first league campaign. Thank you.